So, have you ever been listening to a podcast and thought, oh my God, I totally want to make a podcast? Well, the good news is you can, and you can do so using Anchor. It is totally free, which is awesome. You can record using your computer or your phone, so you can really record and edit anywhere you want, which is rad. You also get distribution through Anchor. That means that you don't have to spend your time putting your podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. It does it for you, which is really cool. Last but not least, you can also make money from your podcast because they match you up with sponsors, which is awesome. So go download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. And happy podcasting. Hello. Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. For this episode, we got to hang out in the Cozy Podcast Corner with Rebecca of Self Esteem. I hope that you enjoy our interview.
I have that mic as well. I love that microphone. It's so easy to just be like, here we go. Just turn it all the way down, plug it in, and you are good.
I sit in this corner and I just go, right, podcast time. So here we go.
I love that you have a podcast corner.
I've had to. It's, part of... I think I'm on podcasts more than I am in the studio at the moment, but that's fine. I enjoy it. Thanks for having me. I'm desperate to be, it's been hard to do anything in America, so thank you. Nobody wants me.
I was like, we want you.
Well, I'm very glad. Thank you.
You're welcome. I was like, why not both wants you in the podcast corner?
Yeah. I'm here. Thank God.
Sounds like a cozy corner at the very least.
There is.
So what have you been up to? Like you had said, I love that. You're just like, America doesn't want me. I was just like, this sounds like the beginning of like a Dickens novel.
And it turns out I become president. Yes. Yes, it's just been crazy. I've been doing it a long time. And last year having an album go well was, it's so great. But it is an adjustment, and it's so funny. As soon as you get like one thing, like because I feel like we've done really well in the UK, and I've been making music here for a long time and doing it for so long, and I'm like, that feels nice. And then we have meetings where they're like, Pitchfork didn't touch her, and I'm like, okay, cool. A new thing to be worried about. Great, I love that for me. So yeah, part of me is like, ugh. And part of me is like, whatever, I don't care. But I love, my old band came to America a lot and I love it. And we're coming again in March. And I'm so excited to come as as a solo artist. And so I do want a bit, I want to do a bit of America, just mostly because I love coming out there.
We're an interesting bunch.
I made some buddies in LA, like 2010, and I still, they're my fam. Like I can't wait to see them, and I love it. It's a really important place for me, actually. So yeah, I'm excited to come and give you a self-esteem show.
Yes, as an LA native, that gives me immense feelings of pride.
Yeah, I used to get my own plane tickets and come out and play at the Echo and the Smell.
Yes.
And
Oh, the bathroom.
there was a band called the Meishi that played, I don't know. They're like still my favorite band of all time. Yeah.
Oh
And
my
I used to do one of their songs with them and like get on stage and like play percussion, and one of the dudes from that band is still, you know, one of my close friends.
That I don't know if you saw my reaction, but it was much like a Scooby-Doo, like doodly-doo.
Yeah, man. That's so good.
Oh my God. Now I'm like, I wonder if I've actually seen you performing before with them. Cause I was like, I haven't heard that name in so long. Cause I play at the Echo, and like I used to play at like Pearspace a lot when it existed. And like
that was the other name. Yeah.
That was like my little home away from home. And like it's so funny. I like that what I blurted out was, oh, the smell bathroom. Why am I like that? Like that's my like main memory of the smell. Is like, wow, that bathroom is really sure something.
I love it though. It was so those formative years in your 20s where like I don't really care about being cool anymore, but the amount I would go to LA and hang out with people in the Meishi, and I'd get back on my Facebook albums full of me just like hanging out at Pearspace and stuff. I was like, thank you. Like for you guys, it's just like whatever is where you are, but for me back here, made me look very cool. And also genuinely, that band gave me the ethos that I still have to this day, which is like they made the music for music's sake, as far as I could tell, and it was art, you know, and they cared about it because it was art and because it had to be like, this is a long time before I discovered like, you know, contemporary art at all, really, which really influences me now. But they were some of the first people I met that really just cared about making the music. Yeah. And they weren't like on a conveyor belt to like success. And over here, it felt very much like, if I get this, then I'll get this, and then I'll be on this, and then I'll like that horrible, like what nextness of the music industry here, for some reason, just didn't. I might be having like a rose-tinted memory of those guys, but they just lived and breathed the music. And still, when I'm a bit disillusioned, I think about John from the Meishi and how he's just devoted his life to making the art. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's all you want to do. It doesn't matter about, you know, what you're wearing to the Brits, you silly bitch.
Well, and you know, it harkens back to I'm like all of 5 minutes ago. I'm like, yes, Pam, the distant past. When you were just like, oh yeah, Pitchfork. And I don't know if you saw, like, I literally like my eyelid twitched. I was like,
exactly. Look, it's like second nature to me to be like, poor me. But then even that, yeah, like I have to strong arm myself into remembering to be an artist that doesn't care about it.
Yes. And like, it's almost like, it's so strange, especially now that there's like, it's kind of like we're in a space of like, there's no rules and we're very clear that the old structures don't work, but no one's made new ones. So we're all just kind of like, it's like the shruggy emoji.
Yeah, very that. It really is.
Like, I
don't know. And I spend, sorry, go on.
No, you go on.
I spend a lot of my time being like, let's rewrite the rule book about the industry. And then, but it's still so powerful to say to me, Pitchfork didn't, or like, we need a TikTok. And I'm like, okay, we need a TikTok, right? Because I'm just sort of a problem solver at my core. But then I have to go, hang on a minute.
Right.
But you know, if I can, Bowie didn't do TikToks. You know, I have to really push myself to remember my point.
Yep.
Same with like mindfulness and stuff. I don't know how you are with that, but I'm like, be in the moment. Come on, bitch. Get back there.
Oh my God. I remember someone said to me, they're like, well, you know, in meditation, when like your mind goes blank. And I was like, I think you must live in a different mind I live in.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm pretty content where I do meditate. I do also like, I've done different mindfulness exercises. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty hype when we get down to maybe like 2 trains of thought. Like we've narrowed it down from like 17.
Good.
Like, I'm like, that for me is like, oh, well, this is a quiet stroll through my mental landscape. And
Yeah, this was a chill way to be stressed for a bit. And let's just get back to the normal level of stress. Thank you.
yes.
Yeah.
And like, it's interesting to think about, like, oh, well, Bowie didn't do any sort of TikTok. And I think about like talking to people during this time, especially because like everyone has to be so online, because the other option is like you're a hermit instead of the podcast corner, you're just in the banal corner.
Yeah.
Just the corner.
I'd be complaining if I was in the other corner. I'm full of it, but yeah. Sorry, carry on your thought.
Oh, you're fine. Like it's so strange though, because like some people enjoy online and some people are like, why am I online? And it's fascinating to me, like just untangling like what people like about it and what people don't like about it. Because some people are like, oh, I love making like creative stuff for socials. And I'm like, that's fascinating. Like, what is that life like?
Like, yeah, I'm like in the middle. Like I feel like I enjoy Instagram and stuff like that. I enjoy communicating myself. It's not like I'm like a total purist that refuses to engage. And I do think we have to move with the times and do it. But for me, I find it very unusable. And I haven't got enough good ideas. And also to sort of piggyback on a trend and hope that makes your music fly is weird to me. I'm like, can't just the music speak for itself?
Yeah, you're like, can't the music like just be music?
Yeah, I work quite hard at that bit. So do I have to think of something for #Pancake Day? I don't want to. But you watch this space, I will. I have a leading TikTok with a pancake.
Watch this space. We are scoring Pancake Day.
Yeah, Mum. You see me. Let me go viral. My fortunes will change. But maybe not.
And even the idea of going viral, it's so strange. Like, like you were saying that it appeared very glamorous because you were posting photos from Los Angeles. And like, I love that you said, like, for you, it's probably just like another Tuesday. And like, it's weird because like coming from here, I do sometimes have that perception of like the things I take for granted. But then like people in the US like mythologize the UK.
Oh, absolutely. See, I dined out on that a lot when I used to come over. Yeah. A lot of people, I got a lot of people chatting me up. I'm saying this. And I'd be like, it's because I'm English, isn't it? And it's because I'm leaving. But when you're 22 and desperate for attention, it was great. But yeah, they did. And one of the guys that we hung out with loved Pulp, who were from Sheffield. So I remember being very like, I don't know him, but I don't know Jarvis Cocker, but I'm happy for you to think I do.
I very much, it was funny if you had told me a few years ago, like, so Pam, you're going to be trapped in your living room for like several years. Yeah. But in cool news, you get to talk to strangers on the internet. And then people listen to your conversations. I'd be like, quoi?
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Like,
sounds all right.
Yeah, I was like, okay. Because I remember I interviewed Jarvis and it was like the funniest moment because I'm sitting there just like this kind of in,
wow.
like my home. And I'm just like, well, this is certainly a strange turn of events.
Yeah. Oh man, anything has now been possible. There's no rules anymore.
That's the like good and bad thing is that I'm like, everything's possible, but also everything's possible. It's very strange. Normally, like when I started this project, like right before everything, I was talking to people about how the multiple things they did like informed their identity. And now it's like, we all do a gazillion things, but also nothing at the same time. And also our identities have shifted, but like, are we being perceived ?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, I guess that kind of broadened the topic at least.
You did. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's wild. And it's like, you spoke to the experience where you're like, yeah, I did release an album. And I'm like, what has your experience been like being an artist during this time? Because I don't know about you, but like I've felt alternatively like pressure to make things, pressure to not make things, pressure to just make sourdough. Like,
yeah, that was it. Yeah. I weirdly responded kind of well to it. I mean, obviously it was awful, but I it was the first time in my life I've not been worried about what everyone else is doing. And I know that's a kind of, that's the thing we're talking about, is that lack of the first real reprieve from FOMO, was weirdly great for me, and also taught me like half of my problem, because I actually don't like being out all the time at all these things. I don't like doing it all. I am weirdly quite introverted, and I had no idea, but the pandemic and how happy I was in it made me I really was like, biggest light bulb moment of my life, but great, because I was like, well, I've cultivated this life for myself where I'm making art full time. I all these things I think I want, I don't think I do. And so it made me very grateful and really understand what I like and what I don't like. So, obviously I will never be like, thank you, pandemic, for all the terror and deaths, but that weird, how odd it is that we had to stop. And I literally went to my mum and dad's house and like did a regression session up there for, I did 6 months with them. Wow. Whilst doing therapy as well, where you're like, you're like very much, it saved me some cash, because the like that parents bit that you do where you're like, oh, you understand that, a lot of your shit comes from like what they're like, good and bad, and it was like exposure therapy, because they were like my housemates in a pandemic. But yeah, and also I wrote a lot of the album before it hit, and then I sat with the demos in that first wave, and I unable to do anything with it because I'm like deeply, terribly untech. Like I do produce, but I can't do it myself. I have to make a man press the buttons, obviously. So obviously that's my least feminist attribute, but yeah, it's too late for me to understand it now. But but I sat on the demos going, realizing what I wanted and taking a lot longer, enforced patience with the making of it. And it meant when I got in the studio, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I'd second guessed it and gone back on it and got, it really forced me to, because I can be quite like quick. I'm a bit of a quick decision maker, and I'm impatient. And then the second wave over here was, I just went and did the same again, but it was like a bit more bleak because it was winter. Yeah. And I sat with the, unmixed album, and the same again, walking around the block, freezing my tits off, listening to it going, I want that to get louder there, or I want that to go there, or I want that to come in there. And being so prepped when we did go into the mix was kind of a revelation. That on the next album, I think we need to like enforce me into isolation for me to get the same amount of like patience and thoroughness, that ended up making the album.
Yeah, well, it speaks to that phrase, forced patience. Is fascinating to me. Like, I'm so interested in then, like, now that it's done, how do you feel about it now that it's done, having gone through that process? Like, do you feel differently about this piece of work than you feel about other pieces that you've created because it was created so differently?
Yeah, I do. I do feel like my first album as a solo artist, I was like, this is incredible and I am a genius. And it was a struggle to get anyone to listen to it. And, it definitely changed. I was very happy with what happened, because obviously it was quite difficult leaving a band and setting my stall out as somebody else. But for the most part, it was, deemed not successful. And this album, and I labored over that, and I tore myself in two over that, and this one, I've just been very chill. Yeah. And even making it, I was like, is it finished? Like, it really was like, have we forgotten something? Like, it felt too smooth.
Interesting.
And I would never previously have trusted that. I've always thought you need to suffer to make it. Whereas and this album sort of going down a lot better is proved to me is like to trust myself. I can absolutely trust myself, and that's the work. And I don't need to be like, but. if that makes sense. Like I've always been like, but unless it takes forever, it can't be good. But that I now see that has not been true. And I've just done a soundtrack for a play that's happening over here. I had 1 month to do it, and I was like, there's no way I can do it in a month. And I've done it in a month, and it's been bliss, and I'm proud of it, and they're happy with it. And, you know, it could well be something quite special. And I'm like, oh, cool. It's like I get to enter the rest of my 30s in this, like,
Yes.
oh, you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
You might know what you're doing.
You might be onto something here.
But as women, it's so hard, right? To be like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Listen to me. Well, for me, it has been. I've just been like, excuse me, do you mind if we maybe this? Or I have to convince people they've thought of it. You know, that's been my life, is convincing men they've thought of it. In order to get my idea down, you know.
Yes. And that confidence in your own ability and your own ideas, like, it's so funny because I've thought much the same thing for a long time, where it was just like, well, unless I've labored over it and 17 other people have approved of it and like all of this stuff. And finally I'm like, or I could just make things. Just make things.
Well, that's what annoys me, because that's the place where men are generally coming from. Is like, I'm just going to make it. And I'm not saying like men don't get neurotic or second guess things, but there's a confidence and a quietness based around just not having to fight for a place in the world that men get. And that's my point with all of this, is like, it took me to 32 for everything to be quiet enough, for me to be safe enough, for me to feel comfortable enough and sure of myself enough to make a record that I'm not desperately second guessing all the time. Whereas, like, you know, especially in this country, I don't know what it's like over there, but over here is this mad confidence that men get bred into them that we don't get. And I'm like, and all these women are just like thriving their tits off in their late 30s because everything falls into place a bit, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just as capable as you. Anyway, I'm on my soapbox. It's 6:30 over here. It's 6:30 and I'm on a long old day.
I was like, I like this soapbox. Continue to stand on this soapbox and proselytize.
Yeah, I do. Given half a chance, I will. But yeah, so sorry, I can't remember your question, but I just feel, you know, I'm excited to see what happens next. Now I know that I don't like going out. I'm confident in what I'm doing. And I'm not pretending anymore. Everything's just very real.
Yeah. Well, freeing yourself of even those expectations, like you said, that it's like, oftentimes we're kind of told we need to find our place in the world. And then it's doubly as hard because then we're second guessing what our place is. And so if you take away those constraints, you're like, oh, I can actually discover what my place is, because now I'm not even like worrying about what other people think because no one's around. Like, in a way, it's like, at first I was like, oh, it's kind of like taking the training wheels off. And then I was just like, well, no, sometimes the training wheels help. And then I was like, what about the bumpers with bowling? And then I was like, oh no, I've still actually bowled into other people's lanes. I'm spectacularly bad at bowling. So I was like, yeah,
that's cute. No.
People apparently find it endearing. I'm glad that I'm like barely 5 feet tall. So people are like, oh, look at the weird pixie. She somehow bounced a bowling ball.
We need to bar her from the bowling alley. We need to make sure she can not get in. She's ruining this place.
They're like whimsical, but maybe not what we need right now. But it's like removing all of that. And also, like you said, that it's like, people seem to, at least what I've observed, is in the past, people discredited women the older we get, because it's almost like we step into our own more and more, and we're more confident. And in a way, like, our field of fucks becomes fallow. And we're just like, I'm just doing my thing. But that's when they're just like, oh, now she's old and difficult. And I'm just like, oh, I am extremely interested in like old, difficult women.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like, that is like, yes. And like, I feel similarly that the older I get and the more I make things, the more confident I am in them, and the more they actually resonate. Because then you're like actually in your power when you're making something, instead of going, oh, is this the right thing? Is this the way?
Yeah. It upsets me. I wonder what would I have made 10 years ago, you know, if I could live and not be scared every day. But oh well, we move.
I was gonna say, I wonder the same thing sometimes looking back at, do you ever look at the things that you made when you were like almost like mid-teenager onward, like that like really tender kind of 16-year-old vibe. And I just want to go back and be like, you're okay.
Yeah, I do. I think about it all the time because I knew what to do then, you know, I had all these ideas. I had so much creativity that I really just let other people mold, really, you know. And it wasn't bad, you know. I made a lot of records in a band with someone who isn't a bad person, but it was like very by his what he wanted, you know. It went through his lens rather than going through mine. And but also, who knows? I think like being successful, quote unquote, in the way that I'm finding myself to be now is so great at 35, you know. Yeah. I think I'm using it for good rather than me at 25 might have used it for like, you know, I might have really, I can't even imagine what I would have done, but I don't think it would have been as, I don't think it would have been good for my brain cells or my body.
That is one thing I've noticed, like a weird perspective growing up in LA is like knowing so many people who found like quote success or fame at a very young age. And it's not that it like makes someone bad. It's just that it can skew certain parts of your experience of the world that then you never get back.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
like we go on tour on Sunday and I'm finally in a van with beds in and we sleep and the van drives through the night and whatnot, and I'm like, that is so exciting and such a luxury for me that in a way where, you know, if I'd made it, quote unquote, again on podcasting, you know, and that would have happened 10 years ago, then I'd be chasing the van with beds being like, please, can we afford it? You know, like I'm very glad that artistically my trajectory has been like, you know, slow and then success wise it has as well. I think it's healthier, certainly for someone like me whose brain works overdrive.
As someone with the brain zoomies, I respect this. So I was like, the brain zoomies and me, see, the brain zoomies and you on this one. And yeah, it's like, it's very strange because like, I think about similar things where it's like, oh, what if I had quote success earlier? But at the same time, then you actually have a foundation beneath you. And then you feel good about doing things like, I'm so curious what it was like actually making the music for a production like that. Like, that's really unique.
Oh, for the play?
Yeah.
I've loved it. It's been amazing. It's a one-woman show about consent, essentially, which my album sort of the major theme is that, like, when you my whole point about my music and me is like I want to live exactly how I want to, and the things I've noticed over the last 30 years is that I'm sort of not allowed to, because I'm a woman and because I'm all these things, and I still don't really have an answer for it. And the play is really aligned, like it's about the legal system really, and rape and the way you can't, you know, justice is very difficult for survivors, and how sort of skewed it is, and then also that grey area between your consent and your non-consent, and how often that is blurred and how often we just have to get on with that. And so like thematically I was like, yes, I can you can literally use my album for it, to be honest. But I love theatre, and I you know I write stuff and I perform and act and things, and it's been the perfect like gateway really, because they gave me scene by scene what they needed to feel like, and I've just sort of sat and made the music, and that's been a really enjoyable process, because when I make records, I'm like, there isn't a scene unless I've written it, you know, and there isn't an agenda unless I've got it. So sort of to be led to interpret something, I've just found very enjoyable, and sort of it's a clunky word to use, but it's like easier. It's easier than making my music. There's no choruses. I'm like, where we go, how do we get to the bridge? I'm like, no, it's sort of meandering or atmospheric, or like just making a piece of music has been very enjoyable. And I say all this, they could, I don't think they will, but they could be like, we hate it, we need different stuff. But it's exciting. And I get to go, like Jodie Comer is the actress. I don't know. She's amazing. She's truly incredible. And, going to see something that will be brilliant anyway, but then also the music I made is really dream come true stuff. And I feel very legitimate. Yes. It's a job. I got employed to do something. That feels good.
Yes. You're just like stamp of validation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm employable. Who knew?
Well, and I love the way you describe that. Like, I like writing to cues as well, because I love when someone's like, here's the emotion, and it's like, so it's ready made, and all you're doing is then you're conjuring how to express that musically, as opposed to conjuring the feeling, the storyline, like all of those things. All you're doing is being like, oh, how do I wrap it sonically? How do I make sense of
it? And I've enjoyed that.
I really quite like it. Like, some of my friends do a lot of like scoring work for TV and things like that. And I find it so intriguing, because I was just like, on one hand, it's a ton of work, like making all those cues in time. But on the other hand, I'm like, that's so cool. Like, I really like doing that for the projects I've done, because you're like, oh, I don't even have to bring up the emotions in me. I can relate to those emotions. Then I just have to be like, what does that sound like?
Yeah. But also with me, I don't know about you, but like, if I'm in the studio, I'm in the studio, and then by the end of being in the studio, I'm so ready to play live that, then I play live, and then by the end of playing live for a while, I'm so ready to create again. And it's just sort of given me a different, it's not been very long, but it's just, I'm now, I tour on Sunday, and I'm like, that other part of me I feel ready for that. And even though I've loved writing to a brief, I'm very excited to go in and write no brief, but my own, like you have to sort of tease my subconscious into the next bit of life. And I'm like, oh, if you just force me into, like it's another nice, the skill set to have, I guess. And I'm glad I've got it. There was no way of knowing if I did or not. So yeah.
And it's very different than, like, I must confess, I'm way more of a studio rat. Like, I will perform and I like performing, but I only like performing once I'm already on stage and doing it. Like, my anticipatory anxiety is like through.
Oh, really?
I'm always like, leave house. Why do I leave piano here? Piano home.
Like, yeah.
Like,
wow.
Yeah, my brain's just like, why would I do that? And then like it's like the moment I start singing, then I'm like, oh, this is the best.
That's why I leave home. Yeah.
And it's like, it's the weirdest thing. And like, I'm so curious, like, what are you feeling in anticipation of touring again? Like, I haven't played live since like 2019, and I'm thinking about like, what would it be like to play a show again? And it's almost like I can't wrap my mind around it, and I know it'll happen, but my brain's just like it's pulling up like an error 404 message.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was funny. And as soon as I did it, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. It's fine. It's weird. It all just comes back. You'll be fine.
Just like does not parse. And that's also interesting that you did acting as well. Like, what did you act in? And do you feel that kind of like informs like your performances when you're performing musically?
Yeah, I've always like dabbled in it and done I've only had a few jobs. I've not done loads, but I'm taking it a bit more seriously now. But it's always been a sort of partner thing to me, in the same way as what I was saying. It's like, I love to just interpret someone else's work as an artist, or I love to write it and do it myself. And one informs the other often. But yeah, as self-esteem, I feel like it's very authentically me, but I'm not acting, but I am using what it takes, what I would use when acting, which is like taking it seriously and really believing it in the moment. I don't know if that makes sense, but like being in an indie band for so long where you're just so discouraged from being serious or taking yourself seriously, or you know, being an indie band with loads of guys and being like the artist that I am was like it weirdly an acting job. I had to act like I didn't care and act like I was nonchalant and act like I was subtle. So I just sat there, my training was very good. Whereas now when I perform, it's myself. It is myself, but it's got a gravitas that I sort of learned from acting, I guess, to be like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You've got to, you got to look at it or you can leave, which indie music doesn't do. The whole ethos, I think, of indie music is to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm accidentally doing this. And that just never went down with me well.
Yeah, it's just
very badly in that arena.
Like what sprang to mind was it's like kind of, it's almost like false modesty where it's like, because everybody does practice. That's the thing is I don't know any indie musicians. Like I was even thinking about like, oh gosh, like every show that I've seen at like the Echo and like every show I've played with different bands, they're like all different stuff. It's just like everybody does actually like put effort in, but like there's no shame in putting effort in and caring about what you do. And I don't know where that attitude came from. I wish I knew, where it's like, it's okay to like take pride in what you're doing and show up authentically instead of being like, oh, this is nothing. It's just like a thing that like I made and like I don't really care if you like it. And you're just like, well, no, you obviously do. You're on stage doing something.
Yeah.
You obviously care.
Like that's the thing that's never made sense to me. And that's the thing that like sort of pop music taught me in a way, was like, Beyonce, Rihanna, all that stuff that, I had to pretend I didn't listen to. Gaga especially, like if anyone's taking themselves seriously and I'm just like, whether you like it or not, it's why not? Art is so, none of us have to make it. We don't need any more songs. We don't need any more paintings. We don't need any more of it. So if we're gonna do it, why act like you didn't mean to, or or you're not that bothered? It's and that's why I love about what I do now. It's like a show and I rehearse and I try hard, and it's important that you care that I did.
Yes. Well, I mean, even thinking about the name that you chose, like thinking about self-esteem and thinking about like having that belief in yourself, it's kind of like what turned over in my mind was I was just like, oh, well, I guess if you try to pass it off like you don't care about something, that might soften rejection if other people don't care. Whereas if you care, that might actually make you vulnerable and open you to the idea that some people really resonate with what you're doing and some people don't. And so it's, it's having the confidence in yourself and the self-assuredness to be like, not everybody is going to like this, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be invested in it. Yeah.
Which you have to have some self-esteem to do, it turns out.
Like, turns out that helps a bit. Because I love that even as like when I'm going through like different like band names and looking at stuff, like you can tell who's like naming things kind of like ironically and like I don't know how to put it other than like I'm going to be so excited when irony goes out of style. It's been so tenacious.
Yeah. Well, band names are stupid. That's the issue. And so like doing like they become good by the work, I think. Like
yes.
But I called it self-esteem without really thinking. I thought it was just I used to say sex appeal or self-esteem were good band names, and I just chose one of them. And then, it's the most intense manifestation ever that I didn't realize was happening was, I had none. I had no self-esteem. My 20s, I was like, whatever, I hate myself. Lol. That was my vibe. And because I was a dickhead or whatever, but like it's so counterproductive. And then I'd still call it self-esteem, still being like, yeah, whatever. And because I don't know why. It's like, that's what helped me fit in or something. And then over the course of making music under that moniker, I'm like, I've got a lot of self-esteem for the first time ever. And it's improved my life drastically. And I'm like, oh.
Like,
so yeah. I keep saying this in interviews, but I'm like, I'm going to call my next band Loads of Money. That's the plan. And then I'll be like, oh, I didn't have any money and now I've got loads.
I've got loads of money. Oh my God. When you said that, it sparked in me like the power of words and the power of what we call ourselves and the way that we speak of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not to get like woo-woo white lady, but it's like, like I'm from Los Angeles. I grew up with
I love it.
Outside my home. I have an excuse.
I love all that, honestly. Hit me with it.
I'm just like, yes. What did someone say to me? They're like, is it manifestation or is it white lady privilege? And I'm like,
Honestly, so true. That's why I like use it sparingly as a term. But yeah.
But it does inform how you behave and maybe what you do, because if you're speaking of yourself in a certain way, you're going to start embodying that and people are going to react to how then it becomes an interaction. If constantly you're referring to yourself as self-esteem, like you're gonna have that. Like,
it's like, magical. It has. And I'm still, I still go through weird spells of the old me or whatever you want to call it, but it doesn't last as long. And I think honestly though, it's not just calling it self-esteem. That's been great. The band, the women in my band are so empowering and so amazing to play with people who love you, and then being taken seriously at all has changed my life, and then you add in therapy and aging. And the perfect storm is a terrifyingly confident, self-assured woman is here on a podcast telling you what she thinks about the world. We've created a monster.
I called it, I just had a birthday recently and entered a new decade, which is so exciting. And I said to one of my friends, I was just like, I feel as though I'm channeling immortal bog witch energy.
Yes. Tell us. Yes. Do it. It's my new MO though. I'm like, the one thing we're all obsessed about not doing is aging, and it's absolutely the only thing that's going to happen to it. That's the only certainty. So I refuse to go into it sad or worried or trying to stop it, because it's just such a shitty use of my time. And it's so, I hang out with men, sometimes I let them near me. And, they're so unbothered by that. It doesn't worry them. Same with like children and all that sort of thing. Like, there's just such a gulf between us in terms of like how you have to see the world. And yeah, my new plan is I want to make records as long as Chris Martin does. You know what I mean?
That's the thing, is like I don't know how to put it other than like, sometimes I look around me and I see like these extraordinary accomplished women, these like just paragons of intellect and beauty. And then like I look at men sometimes and I'm like, oh, it's like a thumb with a toupee on it. Like
they just carried on.
Yeah, and they're just doing their thing. And I'm like, you are unbothered being a thumb. Hey. Like okay.
No offense to people who identify as men, but yeah, you do. It's a different experience of being alive, and I'm like, I refuse to not get from what everyone else gets.
I want more of that unbothered energy so I can use my energy to do other things. And when you said that like you had female band members now, I was also thinking, I was like, hey, if you need any female producers and engineers,
like, good to know. Yes, I'm gonna come out after. I'm coming out in March, but then we're gonna come out and I'm gonna try and do some writing and stuff. So yes, let's do it, babes.
It was like tiny.
Let me get that piano.
And like I was thinking in London, do you know Catherine Davies, the anchoress?
Oh, I don't know her personally. I know of her though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, I should connect you two because she also is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Like,
Wow.
met her in
Really.
LA ages and ages ago, and like she and I just like remained in touch. And her production work is also just like her attention to
Ooh.
detail like blows me away every time. Just like,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Great.
So yes, know that I'm making tiny plotting hands.
Love it. And will you be around, will you be in LA when I'm there in
Yeah.
look, let me check.
Yeah.
Yeah, come to the show. Let me like put you on the list and all that
Oh, you're
jazz.
sweet.
Where am I?
I was like, where
I
are
am
you playing?
hang on, New York, LA Moroccan Lounge.
Oh, the Moroccan Lounge is great. I used to play
Is
there.
it?
It used to be called Bordello. They had this like crazy, looked almost like 1920s burlesque vibe. And then they redid it to this like beautiful kind of like Moroccan Turkish lounge thing. Like
Lovely.
it's the same building. And like the sound is good, the stage is good. Like everything there is just like I like playing there because you're just like, oh, this is everything I actually need in a venue.
Great. Love to hear that.
Yeah.
There's a stage and lights.
There's a stage, there's lights, the room sounds good. It's like not too big, it's not too small. There's a little living room area. There's everything that you would actually want. Unlike the smell, the bathrooms are not a portal to another dimension.
Oh, where else would we go? We'd go to this bar that had, oh God, what's that bar called? It was all red. Everywhere is red. And there's a, this is bad podcast. There is a, photo machine.
Oh,
the cha-cha.
The cha-cha. Oh, like you were probably at the cha-cha or the shortstop. I was like,
we would go there all the time. So my buddies that obviously were like I was going there with now, we're all like in our mid to late 30s. Like, I wonder if we still go to the cha-cha, but I'll find out.
Well, we've started, I don't know if you've been experiencing it there, but like here, kind of much the same as like how the music industry is like, surprise, no rules. Does anyone know what's going on? Absolutely not. That's kind of the vibe also, for better or worse, with everything going on in the States, where it's like we didn't have like a unified response to any of this, and it's only gotten more like fractured as time has gone on. And so in a way, it's almost like county by county, but even like within LA County, there's different places where it's like some people are going out, some people aren't, like all this different stuff. And it's this feeling of like, how do we do this next? And like, I realized I was like, I haven't been back in a photo booth. Like I hadn't even thought of that. That I was like,
yeah, that's an inherently LA thing to not be doing anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys are a bit behind. Yeah. It's like, free for all here now. It's just like masks off, do what you want.
It's a little bit of both. Like some people are free for alling, some people aren't. I think it's because there's such like, even by neighborhood, there's such diversity and just such a spectrum of people like that. It's so interesting when people try to say like, oh, people in LA are like, whatever they say people in LA are. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's maybe like a group in LA, but it's really like this microcosm of everybody. And so there are some people who there are people that have like basically acted like this wasn't happening the entire time.
It's so mad,
which is just like, but then like, there's people who are still like basically like it's like March 2020. So there's this whole, I think the weirdest was like, clearly I'm not a sports person. I was just like, there was a giant football game. And I was like, Pam, it's called the Super Bowl.
All these people met up with a ball.
Yes. And there was traffic. Like, and I remember like driving around and seeing people outside. And like, I even thought to myself, I was like, what is happening? There are humans gathering. What is occurring? Like,
yeah. Wow.
It's so strange seeing things like kind of like starty, But yeah, like that was like a seminal experience in my 20s for sure in LA. Like I still have photo strips, like I'm sure in like, one of my drawers of just like going out. And that's what you do is you always go and like take photos in the photo booth with your friends. There's one there. There's one at like Mohawk Bend. There's like, it's like there's ones in different areas. So like you can, there's one in a bar like in Verdugo. Like there's just all the different, I was like, that really is an LA thing.
There's so many girls in my band and we're all so similar that like an LA photo booth will be very intimidated by how much we'll be going in it. It's a very, you'll see what I mean. But but I'm excited. I started the pandemic in LA. I was out because we were just about to go south by March 2020. Yeah. And I was staying with my friends in LA and in their hot tub as we were like, should I get a flight back to the UK? And we weren't sure because remember it was like, oh, maybe it'll be a few weeks. That's fine. And part of me was like, I'll stay with Roxanne and Mark for a few weeks. This will be fine. But then, I was just like, oh man, it got really real, really quick. But so it's nice to come back. I'll be back and I'm going to, literally start where I left off, which was an LA show and then go into a South by. So let's try again 2 years later.
That's so fascinating that you're almost like plotting the same course, but like after everything that you just went through, I'm like, whoa, it's the same thing, but you're a different version of yourself.
Absolutely. I really am with a record that's, made such a difference. And it's cool, in the grand scheme of like trusting the universe. And, I always struggle with being one of those people, but I am, more and more, I am like trying to trust what comes to me and how it all rolls out. And it's interesting. And I'm just trying to be grateful and go for it,
Yeah, that's really beautiful that you get kind of like a take two.
Yeah, I do, in a really different way. And even being on this podcast, you've made me realize that. So thank you. I owe you £65 for a counseling session I didn't get this week. Because I should just be like, no, I shouldn't be intimidated by coming out there. I shouldn't be trying to make up America like me. I should just be grateful I'm there at all. So
just come out and enjoy. Just be like, oh my gosh, I get to go in a photo booth.
I do. It's going to be lovely. I can't wait. I can't wait to buy expensive things I don't need in bougie places in LA.
Oh yes, get a candle.
Well, I have a story in LA when just before, so the time I came before, the last time I came, when I was still in my old band, and I went to one of those shops with those candles that say, the prayer candles.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, wealth and prosperity and things like that. And I held health and success candles in my hands, and they were heavy. So I was like, I can only get one. This before I went solo or anything. And I put health back on the shelf and bought success. And I've still got it to this day. It's very important to me. And I just always think, so maybe this time I'll come back and I'll get health just to cover all bases.
There we go. I was just like, even just the analogy, you're like, and then I put health back on the shelf and I was like, oh, that boded poorly.
I know. So, because now I would absolutely choose health. But I guess that's what hits you in the face. I don't know.
Gosh. But well, you got to come back. You got to go to the candle shop. So I was just like, already, I'm just like, ooh, I have producers that I want to introduce you to.
Yes, brilliant. Let's definitely. Let's please keep in touch. Because I'm going to be coming out a lot. So I'd love to let's do some work and come to the show.
I'm doing a little awkward shoulder shimmy.
Good on a podcast.
Oh, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate you hanging out in Podcast Corner.
No, it's lovely, Pam. It's been lovely to meet you.
Oh,
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both? If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.